There's something deeply unsettling about old photographs. Maybe it's the way they freeze moments in time, capturing people who've been gone for decades, their eyes staring back at us across the years. But sometimes, when you look closely at these vintage images, you might notice something that shouldn't be there. A figure in the background, a shadow that seems to have a form, a presence that nobody remembered being there when the photograph was taken. For as long as photography has existed, people have been finding unexplained figures lurking in their pictures. We call them shadow people, and they've become one of the most widely reported paranormal phenomena of our time. But here's what makes old photographs particularly fascinating in this discussion. These aren't digital images that could be easily manipulated with software. We're talking about daguerreotypes, tintypes, and film negatives from an era when creating a fake image required incredible technical skill and resources. Let's go back to the beginning. The earliest known photograph of a human being was taken in Paris in 1838 by Louis Daguerre. The exposure time was so long, around 10 minutes, that the busy boulevard appeared empty. Moving people and carriages simply didn't register on the plate, except for one figure. A man having his boots polished stood still long enough to appear in the frame. He's there, a ghostly shadow of a person, the first human ever captured by a camera. And already we see this phenomenon, this shadowy quality that would come to haunt photography for the next 2 centuries. But what happened in those early days of photography is crucial to understanding the shadow people phenomenon. Those long exposure times meant that anything moving during the shot would create strange, blurred, semi-transparent figures. People who walked through the frame would appear as dark, formless shapes, almost like shadows passing through the image. The technology itself was creating ghosts. During the Victorian era, photography exploded in popularity, and so did something else: death. The mortality rate was staggering, especially for children, and people wanted to remember their loved ones. This gave birth to post-mortem photography, where families would photograph their deceased relatives, often posed as if they were still alive. These photographs are haunting enough on their own, but photographers soon realized they could exploit the technical limitations of their cameras to create something else entirely. Spirit photography was born. William Mumler, a Boston photographer, claimed in 1861 that he could capture images of the dead appearing alongside the living. His photographs showed clients posing normally, but with strange, shadowy figures hovering behind them or beside them, translucent faces, ghostly forms, what looked exactly like what we'd now call shadow people. Mumler made a fortune. Even Mary Todd Lincoln, widow of the assassinated president, sat for one of Mumler's spirit photographs. In her image, a shadowy figure stands behind her, hands on her shoulders. Mumler claimed it was Abraham Lincoln himself. The thing is, Mumler was eventually put on trial for fraud. Photographers testified that his effects could be achieved through double exposure and other darkroom tricks. He was acquitted due to lack of evidence, but his reputation was destroyed. Yet even knowing he was likely a fraud, when you look at those photographs today, they still send a chill down your spine. Those shadow figures look disturbingly real.
But not all mysterious figures in old photographs can be explained away as deliberate hoaxes. There are thousands of vintage photographs in archives and family collections around the world that contain unexplained shadow forms. Images where the photographers had no apparent motive to fake anything. Simple family portraits, pictures of workers at job sites, classroom photographs, and there, in the background, or sometimes right in the middle of the group, stands a dark figure that nobody can identify. Let's talk about what people actually see in these photographs. The descriptions are remarkably consistent. A humanoid shape, usually dark or shadowy, sometimes completely black, sometimes more of a gray translucent figure, often lacking facial features or distinct details, sometimes appearing to wear old-fashioned clothing, like hats or long coats. These figures usually appear to be standing among groups of people or in doorways and windows in the background. What makes these particularly unnerving is that they're often not noticed until years or even decades after the photograph was taken. Someone will be looking through an old family album and suddenly spot a figure that no one remembers being there, a shape among the wedding guests that no one can identify, a dark form standing in the window of a supposedly empty room. There's a famous example from the early 1900s, a photograph taken at the Goddard Squadron, a British Royal Air Force base. It's a group photo of the squadron, and every member is accounted for, except for one face. Behind one of the seated airmen, there's a translucent face that seems to hover in the background. Members of the squadron later identified it as Freddie Jackson, an air mechanic who had been killed by an airplane propeller just 2 days before the photograph was taken. His funeral had been held on the very morning this photo was shot. The squadron members insisted he wasn't there when the picture was taken, yet there he is, or appears to be, a shadowy presence among his former comrades. Now, skeptics will point out all the rational explanations: double exposure, either accidental or intentional, light leaks in the camera or during development, chemical stains on the photographic plate or film, pareidolia, which is our brain's tendency to see faces and human forms in random patterns, someone actually standing there who was later forgotten. All of these are valid, documented causes of strange figures appearing in old photographs. But here's what keeps this mystery alive. The phenomenon didn't stop with old technology. Even today, in the age of digital photography, people report capturing shadow figures in their images. These aren't blurry shapes caused by long exposures. Modern cameras have shutter speeds of fractions of a second, yet people still photograph dark, humanoid forms that appear in their pictures, figures they didn't see with their own eyes when they took the shot. Some researchers have suggested that whatever shadow people are, if they're real at all, they might somehow interact with the photographic process in ways we don't understand. Cameras capture wavelengths of light that human eyes can't always perceive. Infrared, ultraviolet, these are invisible to us, but not to camera sensors. Could shadow people exist in a spectrum we can't normally see, only becoming visible when captured by a lens?
Others have theorized that shadow people might be some kind of interdimensional beings, or perhaps impressions left by traumatic events, somehow burned into the fabric of a location and occasionally captured on film. There's also the time slip theory, the idea that cameras might sometimes capture images from different points in time, that the person in the photograph is actually there, just not in our present moment. What's particularly fascinating is how the description of shadow people has remained consistent across cultures and throughout history. Long before photography existed, people reported seeing shadowy humanoid figures. Medieval accounts describe shadow demons. Indigenous cultures around the world have legends of shadow beings. The consistency of these reports across time and geography is either evidence of a real phenomenon or proof of shared human psychology and fear. But let's focus on something specific about old photographs that makes them different from modern reports: the permanence. When someone today says they saw a shadow person, it's a fleeting experience, a personal account. But a photograph is physical evidence, something that can be examined and re-examined. Those old glass plates and film negatives can be analyzed by experts, and time again, analysts have confirmed that many of these images show no signs of manipulation or technical defects. The figures are simply there, captured in the emulsion, unexplained. There's a particular category of these photographs that's especially disturbing. Images where the shadow figure appears to be interacting with the living subjects. A dark hand on someone's shoulder. A shadow face leaning in close to a child. These photographs suggest awareness, intention, presence. If they're accidents of chemistry and light, they're remarkably specific accidents. Consider also the timing of when these photographs were taken. Many come from eras of great tragedy. Photos from the Civil War sometimes show unexplained figures among the soldiers. Images from the World War I trenches occasionally reveal shadow forms that no one can account for. Photographs from hospitals, asylums, and sites of disasters seem to have a higher occurrence of these mysterious figures. What's also worth considering is the context in which these old photographs exist. Many of them have been passed down through families for generations. The stories attached to them, the memories, the identities of the people in the pictures, these details get lost over time. So when someone today looks at a photograph from the 1890s and sees an unfamiliar figure, is it truly unexplained? Or is it simply that the explanation died with the last person who was there? Yet there are cases where the photograph was examined immediately after development, where the shadow figure was noticed right away, where everyone present insisted that no such person had been there. These immediate discoveries are harder to dismiss. The witnesses are reliable, the timeline is clear, and the mystery remains intact. Modern analysis of old photographs has revealed some interesting patterns. Certain types of cameras and film seem more prone to capturing these anomalies. Certain locations appear again and again in collections of unexplained photographs. Mirrors and reflective surfaces often feature prominently. Doorways and windows, those threshold spaces, seem to be hotspots for shadow figures. What cannot be debated is the emotional impact these photographs have. When you're looking at an old family portrait and you spot a figure that shouldn't be there, the feeling is profound. It's not just curiosity or fear. It's a disruption of reality, a crack in the certainty of the past. These photographs were meant to preserve memory, to capture truth, to freeze moments exactly as they were. When they show us something impossible, it shakes our faith in what we can know and trust. The digital age has brought new challenges to this field. Now, any photograph can be manipulated with ease. The trust we once placed in photographic evidence has been eroded. But this makes those old photographs even more valuable. A glass plate negative from 1880 cannot have been photoshopped. The chemistry and physics of 19th century photography are well understood. When one of these images contains something unexplained, it demands to be taken seriously. Some of the most compelling examples come from professional photographers who had no interest in the paranormal. News photographers, portrait studio owners, documentary photographers who were simply trying to capture reality. When their work revealed shadow figures, they were often as surprised and disturbed as anyone. These weren't people seeking fame or money from paranormal claims. And perhaps that's the real power of shadow people in old photographs. They represent the limits of our knowledge, the boundaries of our understanding. They exist in that uncomfortable space between the explainable and the impossible. They force us to confront the fact that the past, for all our photographs and documents, remains in many ways unknowable. We can capture images, but we cannot always capture truth. What makes someone a shadow person rather than just an unidentified individual in a photograph? It's the quality of the image, the way the figure appears. There's usually something off about them. They're darker than they should be given the lighting. They're slightly translucent. They seem to exist both in and out of the scene simultaneously. They violate the rules of photography in subtle but noticeable ways. What we do know is that these images continue to fascinate and disturb us. They challenge our assumptions about reality, about death, about the nature of existence itself. They remind us that for all our scientific advancement, there are still mysteries. The universe may still hold secrets that our instruments can detect, but our minds cannot fully comprehend. Old photographs were meant to conquer time, to preserve the past perfectly. But instead, they've shown us that the past is not as solid as we'd like to believe. It's filled with shadows, with gaps, with figures we cannot name and presences we cannot explain. Every old photograph is a window into another time, and sometimes, when we look through that window, something looks back. The question remains open. Are shadow people real entities, genuine paranormal phenomena captured by the camera? Are they tricks of light and chemistry, given meaning by our pattern-seeking brains? Are they forgotten people, their identities lost, now transformed into mysteries by the passage of time? Or are they something else entirely, something we don't yet have the framework to understand?
The photographs exist. They can be held, examined, analyzed. The figures are there, undeniably present in the image. What they represent, what they are, remains one of the most intriguing questions at the intersection of photography, history, and the paranormal. And as long as old photographs continue to surface from attics and archives, as long as people keep looking closely at these frozen moments from the past, the mystery of shadow people will continue to haunt us, just as they haunt the images themselves, dark and silent, watching from across the years.